The winds are changing, and I can smell EU5 on them. But before we get there, we have one final, definitive DLC for Europa Universalis 4. We've got new content from the Hordes to the Netherlands to Bohemia to Mesoamerica to South America. I mean, everyone's getting an update. Even HoratioNullbuilt getting its own mission tree. I mean, Trebizond has its own like unique government. It's insane. It's awesome. So now we have pretty much all the information. I figured I'd go through and summarize and tell you exactly what to think. And speaking of telling you exactly what to think, you should subscribe right now, because we're almost at 200,000 subscribers, and that's just a nice round number. If you're a map gamer like me, you appreciate those kinds of things. Well then, hello everyone. Hello boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children, adults, everyone. I promised that I would do a little bit of a roundup on the roadmap of the EU4 Winds of Change. Yes, I've known about the name the entire time. I just wasn't allowed to tell you. I've seen a lot of people do sort of week in, week out ones. I thought that was a little bit useless for me personally. Obviously for them it works, that's all good, but for me I thought I'd wait for it to be all out together and then I can sort of do a deep dive in. It's the same thing I'm doing for EU5, for those of you wondering why I haven't commented on that. So for those of you who don't know, this is a new DLC that is going to be coming out soon. I almost said the date, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what the date is. So I thought that we'd go through each of the dev diaries and I'll give you a rundown of the features and my takes on it, because my takes are what matter. So generally speaking, this dev diary, this DLC is focused on predominantly, in my opinion, it's predominantly the New World, but it also adds flavor everywhere. And it sort of feels like a roundup. Obviously, we all know that EU5 is Project Caesar, right? I obviously. Dude, Paradox completely screwed over a video of mine, but in announcing the date too early, in my opinion. But you'll hear all about that later. Anyway, focusing directly on this, first up we have the Inca, the Aztecs, and the Mayans. These are all going to get an overhaul, which is going to be great because I think they desperately need it, particularly the Inca. This has always been a fun region to play in my opinion at least. It's also one that I do recommend for not new players, but somewhat new players, just because you're a little bit isolated and you get this feeling of like, oh god, when the Europeans come. That's always fun. And then we obviously in Central Europe we have particularly the ones of interest to me are Netherlands and the Venice, because I think that's going to be really fun to sort of set up more trade side of things. I feel like at this point in EU4 we have a lot of the blobbers. We're going to cover hordes in this anyway, but I think that difference in gameplay style is going to be very, very important. I'm not going to talk about longevity of EU4 because, again, EU5. But in terms of a roundup, I think it's a nice little send-off. So obviously we've got Netherlands, Austria, Germany in general, Venice, Italy, Hungary, and Bohemia. So some nice ones there. I'm definitely going to be diving into Bohemia. And then finally, obviously, Central Asia. We have the Timurids and the Mughals and the Hordes predominantly, but then also Hiss and Kafir and some others are also getting a bit of an overhaul. But I think these three are going to be the ones that are going to be focused on. So yeah, obviously we have Father Loris is very, very, very good with this kind of stuff. Anyway, let's dive into the first one. So the first one is going to be Aztecs, Mayans, and Incans. Okay, so first looking at Mexico, obviously we have things like the Mexican trade node has a digital sense of the trade. I mean, little stuff like that. I'm not really too like about, you know, but this is really cool. So there's going to be sources of obsidian, right? So if you have Mesoamerican tech, then you get to be able to exploit obsidian, which I think is a great little change that I never personally thought of, because obviously obsidian was used in this, widely used in these cultures and these civilizations at this time period. So, and obviously indeed before that as well. So for me, it's like a cool little nod of something I didn't even think of. Montezuma is a little bit better. And we have some specific flavor to do with the states, like the Triple Alliance, because the Aztecs, as they highlight, were never a centralized EU4 depicts, and I think this is something that EU4 really struggled with in general. So anything that sort of helps with that, we did see the estates have been used more and more in recent memory to try to delineate different civilizations. But obviously in EU4, everything is a nation state, despite the fact that we have this transition from sort of feudalism and not really national identities over to Westphalia, which introduced the concept of a nation state. So EU4 can't do that. We'll see what happens with EU5 with that. I'm not going to go through every single mission. I think that's kind of boring. So instead, we can just have a quick scroll through and sort of pick out some key things here. I think specifically the width and breadth of it is going to be always fun. And obviously you have some gold stuff, which is going to be great. Hopefully that helps out with some inflation stuff. I remember my first ever EU4 game. That really screwed me over. I did not know how bad inflation was. So we have dominating the Mexican region. We have government and blood tributes, which is really, really cool. Because we have a new government type, which is going to be great. I love unique government types. I think they're some of the best stuff in the game. So the fact the Aztecs are getting one is pretty cool. And anything like here that incentivizes complete conquest is quite good. It's good that it synergizes with it. Obviously, in this sort of region, you're going to be constantly, for those who don't know, with the Aztecs and the Nahuatl faith, it does incentivize constant sort of conquest. Can demand blood. It's like a separate mana. This feels like very much like it came from a mod. I don't know how to describe that. Time will tell. Like I said, I do like the idea of unique stuff. I don't know if I like the idea of like another mana type being introduced. It's not specifically a mana type, but you know what I mean? Like a separate thing entirely. I'm willing to hold off judgment on that one though. But we'll see how that goes. And then obviously the final tree is economics based. And I think this is important as well, the ability to switch mission trees, because oftentimes you want to do the cool things in a region, but you can't. So it's good that you can actually start as anyone, because otherwise you play in Mesoamerica and there's no point playing anyone but the Aztecs, because they're the ones with the flavor. But yeah, then on to the Mayans, and obviously all the Mayans are geared towards forming the Mayan Empire, or the Confederation, I should say. And one thing I do like here is that you have, every time you unlock a religious reform, the missions get reset, so you have to do them again, which is very, very unique. We haven't seen that before, which is quite cool. And another notable change here is that you only need 2 instead of 5 Mayan religious reforms. However, you get massive penalties, which I'm going to see how that works. The harsh treatment cost plus 100%, which I really don't think is too tricky, but the ability to not manually decrease war exhaustion is kind of bad, as well as gaining +3 war exhaustion. So I like what they've gone for. Like, you're kind of always on the brink. We'll see if that's enjoyable or annoying. I think that's going to be more enjoyable on the enjoyable side, which is cool, because anytime I was thinking of playing Mesoamerica, I'd always default to the Aztecs instead of the Mayans. Yeah, I mean, it'd be cool that they have equal amounts of flavor. Obviously, they had their own unique mechanics and that sort of stuff, but it never really appealed to me as much as the Aztecs did. Now, the meat of the Mayan Confederation, you have specific government reforms, which the government reform system to me in EU4 is one of the crowning achievements of it. I love it so much. I think the ability to build your nation like that is so phenomenally... I mean, I would even go so far as to say it's underrated. People sort of just accept it as a thing now. But it does lend itself really, really nicely to things like flavor, like here. And these are powerful mechanics, man. Annex relations impact is... but liberty design subjects and diplomatic relations is cool, at the same time as compounding that with the whole diplomatic annexation will no longer incur the reputation penalty. You can get that with your estate privilege, but it's nice to have it inbuilt. Yeah, and again, it's nation building. And anytime you do nation building, it's a lot of fun. So I'm probably going for the Mayan first out of these two, just because, again, nation building appeals to me so much. It's cool. So I didn't mention it before, but both the Inca and the Aztec mission tree have the ability to buff your ruler. So you have this, which I really like, because you can sort of hit the ground running with it. So we'll see how that impacts everything. But yeah, I love that kind of change. I love when things dynamically change versus being built from the start. In my opinion, EU4 should have always had more things that would increase and also decrease your ruler's ability as they get older, for example. Like, have this sort of like cresting high. It makes no sense that you go from like a baby that's a 666 to a 95-year-old man who's a 666. It's just... So this kind of stuff where you buff it through activity, as limited as it is, always going to appeal to me. Really enjoy that. So these green, just to summarize what's going on here, these green stripe things are provinces that can be colonized via this decision, where you start a frontier colony, which is pretty good. It allows the Inca to sort of breach past their initial starting point, and allows you to actually get a head start on dominating South America. It's late where I am, to be clear. As cool as these things are, and I won't knock them, because things like the estate privileges, like unique estate privileges, are very, very cool. I've never personally been too much of an adopter of these. I mean, they're very, don't get me wrong, flavor is always good. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just giving my opinion in terms of the fact that I think that stuff like the government reform stuff is way cooler than this. Yeah, but this is still pretty cool. Then once you form Inca, you get the whole Incan mission tree. And there you go. Andean Empire, which gives the Inca authority ability. So yeah, government, unique government reforms. Give it to me all. It's lovely. So the max Incan authority gives you yearly absolutism, morale damage plus 25%, as well as monthly autonomy change. And that sounds pretty powerful. I don't know how hard it's going to be to keep it to 100%. It looks to me like if you just have high legitimacy, high stability, and high tolerance, it looks like you'd be in a decent place. I don't see the decay too fast. I like the fact that it does penalize you for having average unrest, personally, because it encourages a bit more of a stable playstyle and rewards it, which again is kind of lost in EU4 a lot of times. And this casualty is dealt by the army monk general. I really think we're seeing a blossoming at the end of EU4 with all these unique stuff where it's like, okay, you have to specifically use this monarch and this monarch's going to be powered up and that kind of stuff. I've always enjoyed that kind of thing. So I think we're seeing a nice twilight, really, at the end of EU4 as we prep for EU5. But yeah, that is the end of the first section we look at. Like I said, I'm not going to go through each individual mission tree. I'll just point out some cool stuff like this. For example, you get a special guard mercenary company, which gives you which receives less shock and morale damage. That kind of stuff is always cool. I love unique unit types. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, from now I want you to Apocalypse is a terrible film. I'm saying it now. Well, it's not terrible, it's just massively historically inaccurate. I mean, in Apocalypto, at the end, the Spanish turn up, but they're like, the Spanish would have been under the Muslims at the time. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, but it's a fun film. Yeah, I want people to point out which part of the DLC they're most excited for. Because now we have a strong contender in Venice, Italy, and the Netherlands here. And Venice is such a unique nation, man. I'm so happy that they're getting more attention here, because it's such a weird nation that a city-state focused around trading would flourish. I mean, history has never been kind to city-states. You've got obviously Carthage, Novgorod, and Venice itself, and Genoa. They all had these brief shining moments where there were inherent ideals of meritocracy, not inbuilt through things like, not because they were more moral than other people, but because of a society that values the generation of wealth is more likely. I'm not saying they didn't have aristocracy, to be clear, but it's more likely going to lend itself well to that. Less Carthage, to be honest, but I feel like Venice was a bit more of that volition, really. And obviously you had the flourishing of art and culture and everything else. Yeah, so it'd be cool to sort of go, what if? And this, to me, is something that I quite like. Charting the Far Seas, the idea that they're going to start going for this global trade, which historically is what killed them off, the idea of global trade and trade with the Americas. So, yeah, it seems very reasonable that this would happen. And we have a a unique government. I'm going to make so much fun content, man. A unique government mechanic, which is really cool. So, once you have maximum power, you can't declare war. So if you allow the council authority to get to 90 plus, you're in very much of a bad shape. But if the just stats are low, the council can be more compliant at ease. It's a nice little trade-off. I wonder how it's going to feel. Because, again, stuff like that can sometimes sound really cool from the outset, and I think it is going to be really cool. But it could also be very frustrating. We'll see. Generally speaking, I think it's always good from a gameplay perspective to facilitate things, not prevent them. For example, making conquest easier versus making staying tall harder, let's say. So it's yeah. Incentivizing with carrot and not stick, I think, always yields better gameplay results because you feel rewarded for doing something versus punished for not doing something. That's just the usual gameplay mechanic that I enjoy, or at least I hold to. But I'm also in a minority where I enjoy being punished for not doing things in the game. So yeah, that's I think it raises the stakes a lot, but I'm very much aware that could be an issue for the wider player base. Now, this is cool, declaring La Serenissima, but I don't ever want to see that color again. The Venice is such an amazing color. I don't want that. I don't want that to change. Ideas of the Golden Republic are really good. You've got the galley power, the trade steering, and obviously the discipline is the ambition of phenomenal. Tech cost minus 10% is pretty decent as well. Global trade, fire damage. These are very, very, very strong. I'm sad my boy Tunis is going to be the second ranked naval power. I will maintain that Tunis, for whatever reason, in EU4 is a phenomenal naval power. This kind of stuff of compounding what you are selecting with the mission tree is awesome because it steers you further into specialization. One thing that's really cool about Imperator Rome, for example, is the technology system in that you will probably never in a normal game get all of the techs because you have a limited amount of tech points that are generated. And so you are forced as a nation to decide the fabric of your society. And I feel like that's not a bad thing. I think it's really fun because you start to imbue yourself with a sense of identity within the game. I'm gonna get really weird into game design here. But yeah, you start to imbue yourself into this. So if you're a defensive, you pick defensive ideas, and that's further compounded with local defensiveness, your mentality when playing the game is going to be to stand and hold the line, which I think is really, really cool. I love that sort of mentality that can be generated from the ideas, because you're more likely to continue that campaign because you have more of a kinship with it versus just building stats, if that makes sense. So I think that's why this is going to make Venice one of my favorite games to play. Like this kind of mentality, at least. And you have it again over here. And finally, the alternate history path of Venice, spreading its mercantile and maritime growth beyond the Mediterranean, which is very cool. I will, however, say that I've never seen the Mamluks actually team up with Venice. It would be really cool if that's actually forced through, because, like it says, it require cooperation alliance with the Mamluks, but I've never seen that work, which is a shame because it was on the cards historically. But yeah. Briefly looking at Italy. I don't really want to look at Italy too long because I feel like it's pretty standard, I think. It's a very cool mission tree, don't get me wrong. But it's not as unique in my... Well, I don't know. Well, it's not... Okay, to be fair, it's struggling from just coming off of Venice, which I think has a very strong national identity, to... you're looking at like Roman, like real Roman Empire and that sort of stuff, which... It hurts me because I'm going to say something controversial here. I think that every nation aspiring to be the Roman Empire is not as fun in games. Because it's the natural conclusion, because everyone loves the Rome, right? Everyone loves the Roman Empire. So we'll be Italy, we'll move into the Roman Empire. I mean, hell, you got Mussolini. I'm not saying there's not historical precedence for it. I'm just saying I personally just think there should be more of a focus on forging your own national identities instead of looking at the past. Just because, yeah, blatant Roman claimants, dude. Okay, let me split this into two. My opinions on history and the Romans mean that I don't like it, but in how it looks like it's going to play out, this looks awesome. Like, fulfilling the promise that the claims are required to form the Roman Empire, being 90% aggressive expansion, 90% war score, pushes you in that direction, which is pretty cool. So I'm not saying this isn't going to be fun. I'm more lamenting history than I am the game, because I think this is going to be cool. Okay, we're going to move on to the Netherlands, because I feel like... I'll obviously leave a link in the description so you can check all the stuff for yourself, but I feel like Italy's pretty self-explanatory. I don't really feel the need to go through mission by mission and explain what happens. There's nothing really here that I think needs to be discussed. I think it's all really good. It's full of flavor, and I think, yeah, go read for it yourself if you're interested in that. But yeah, let's have a look at the Dutch. I really like that there's being a distinction made between the Utrecht, between the Frisians and the other Low Countries that are under the Burgundian yoke. I think all of them have, at this point, different journeys ahead of them, so it's cool that they're not just being treated the same just because, they're Dutch. Because that is determinism. That is the idea that because the Dutch nation formed later, we're going to treat, in the 15th century, all of these nations as the same because they share a descendant, if that makes sense. So it's cool that they're being treated as independents and with their own unique paths. I think a lot of times in historical video games, we can all fall into that idea that this broad group, because of what happened later on down the line, again, in our lifetime, or in our timelines, we treat them all the same as if it's a natural course that all of them are going to want to secure that identity. I'm not saying that they don't share a lot of cultural values. All of them might have been like, oh, hey, we want a Dutch nation. It's just the individual struggles need to be differentiated, especially at this point where they're not a unified political entity. I swear half the people are going to be clicked off when I started talking about game design and giving like little thoughts as to as to how I think things should be manifested. They're just here for... Stop it, late. They're just here for like EU4 modifiers. Speaking of, hey, look at this. 20 legitimacy. So, je m'entendrai. I don't know how to say that, to be honest.
will alleviate the Tech 10 requirement, which is really cool. Allow you to solidify things. The Dutch was, again, similar to the Venetians, but in the same way, completely different. Such a unique nation that they were able to go toe-to-toe with the great powers of Europe, despite being tiny and having a navy that could challenge the British. I mean, they sailed up the Thames and kicked their asses. So you gotta give them a special nod for that. Here we go. Supremacy in the Channel, relations of Britain and glorious revolution. Cool. Conquest of England is going to give 15 years worth of national sailors and heavy ship costs. That makes sense. And gaining English as an accepted culture. That's cool. Now this is very cool. The United Crowns and having its own ideas for the United Crowns. Very cool. What's that? Going to be some discipline, goods produced, Admiral Fire, Pip. We've got an extra merchant here, some siege ability, inflation, control probably, and some settler increase with some, what's that? Trade efficiency, land fire damage, and morale of navies. I hate that I know that. I wish there was more flavor in the Hansa. I think the Hansa are so cool. But I think that there was previously. I'm not saying there should be a Hansa here, like flavor in the Hansa here. I'm just saying the Hansa are cool. I love traders. You wouldn't expect it because I don't typically play Tool, but I think in terms of historical civilizations. And again, we have this idea that things are going to be doubled if you go down the defensive ideas, and you're going to really entrench yourself. Very, very cool. And I like the distinction here. You could have more ship cannons at the cost of this. You can have more ship trade power at the cost of ship cannons. These sorts of stuff. Ludy's going to have a field day making another one of his Tool Netherlands games. He loves that. I don't see why you wouldn't make them. They do really well for him. Okay, cool. Colonialism. This is what I really wanted to dive into here. The VOC is a commercial enterprise similar to the East India Company. Very, very cool considering they were there first. The Dutch were basically the first ones to head into India, into Southeast Asia, and in these sorts of places and sort of secure themselves the spices. I mean, they're just going to be your ideal, like, sitting tall, colonizing. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think. Very excited for this. Hey, we've got the eating of Arnold. Nice. If you didn't know, the Dutch ate their prime minister once. This is exactly what I want to see, though. I love playing small trading nations like the Netherlands, and then, meanwhile... yeah, that's exactly what you want to see. That's kind of the ideal Dutch game, to be honest. They're very unique. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, that is something I'm very excited for. Venice and the Dutch. I'm going to pump out so much content because I know I'm going to really enjoy all these full playthroughs on all of them. Stream them as well. Oh my god. Next month's going to be big. Okay, so staying in Europe, we have Hungary, Austria, Bohemia, and Germany. I would say nations, apart from Bohemia, that don't really need too much of a look in. So I'm glad that they did because I wasn't expecting it. And I'm very excited for the Hungary one specifically. Especially since they're getting its own unique reform, the Apostolic Kingdom. Because a lot of the Hungarian identity, especially bordering the Ottomans at this point, was the defense of Christendom. And so it's cool that that's being recognized. And in fact, you're gonna get the Order of the Dragon local organization. So you get special orders that's going to give you local garrison size and local garrison army damage. Garrison army damage is not a modifier that you typically see, so I want to see if I can sort that out, like if I can come up with some strategies with it. So they've moved the Hungarian national ideas into other bits of their content. So let's see what they've got here. Cavalry power. Okay, cool. And army tradition decay. Good start. And I like this cavalry infantry ratio. I'm not a fan of the fact that it comes at the end because you kind of have to build to it. But hey, it would be cool if it was like the second idea. But we have global unrest -1, which I always think is a useless one. It's such a waste of an idea slot for a nation because you're never at the point where -1 unrest does anything. -2, maybe you can start stacking stuff, but -1 just doesn't do anything. Mind you, you get discipline 5%, which is nice. 20% global manpower is always good. Tax modifier, always nice. Production efficiency is nice. And province trade power modifier. And no religion penalty is very interesting. Okay, we have the new building up of the Hungarian missions, which I think Hungary is such an underrated nation to play as, to be honest. I think it's a lot of fun. And I'm very glad they split these into two, because before, I think you had to do Bohemia and then into Austria, whereas now you could deal with them separately, which makes a lot more sense in my opinion. This is really cool. So you get an empowerment of the strong duchies, estate privilege if you get subjugation. If you subjugate a bunch of Balkan tags. I wish it would force you to make them marches, and sort of not force you maybe, but like give you bonuses if they are marches, so that you can really like double down in there. Additional plus 50% vassal force contribution. That seems very high. I'm thinking now. Because it'd be cool if it made you... Because marches at this point against the Ottomans were very, very important. Just because you had these tiny little micro-states. It wasn't the big states of Europe that held the Ottoman advance back. It was these tiny states in Moldavia, in Albania. Like, it was these tiny states that actually did a lot more than Hungary. I mean, Hungary would collapse very, very quickly. Obviously, the Austrians and the Poles did push them back, but... You know, Crusade of Varna opened up Europe for Ottoman expansion, and guys like Skanderbeg sort of tried to hold the door shut for a little bit. For me, what's going to be interesting is, so there's an entire section of trade, to be clear, focused on the Ottomans. It'll be interesting to see if the AI can make use of this. I haven't, since the most recent update, I haven't seen a single instance where the Ottomans haven't beaten everyone around them, including the Mamluks. I haven't really seen it at all. Unless I'm personally involved. So it'd be interesting to see if occasionally, I don't want it every time, but like 1 out of 10 times for the Ottomans to lose would be very, very cool. So maybe the siege ability could counter the Ottoman siege ability, but I think they got plus 10% to the Ottoman, like plus 33% that they have, you know, at the start. So I don't know if it's going to do anything necessarily apart from help the player, but you got to think about how these things impact the AI. This is the filthiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Hungary gains subjugation Castello on the Emperor and every elector. It lasts for 25 years. In 25 years, you can storm through everyone, which is pretty insane. Becoming the Bane of the Empire sounds really, really interesting. I don't know how you'll be able to navigate the aggressive expansion, but obviously it is like at the end of the mission tree, so at that point you should have blobbed a little bit. So now we're looking at Austria. So the starting position of Austria has changed, and I think this is going to be tricky for the AI. So because of the whole house divided thing, the Archduke of Austria was only created in 1452. So, Austria is keeping the Archduchy reform, but they have this privilege to represent the split of Styria. A lot of people wanted them to have Styria as a vassal, or, you know, well, vice versa. But I think that'll be too hard to reconcile. I think the Austrians would get just sort of stomped on. But it's cool we're getting more internal stuff as Austria, because Austria I feel like sometimes a little bit like get the emperorship and stomp everything. So it's cool that, yeah, you have the option to take a decision to unite the house and that sort of stuff. I wouldn't say there's like too many shocking things about the Austrian mission tree. Again, I don't want to sit there and go through each and every single mission. I think that's a waste of both of our times. But I do like stuff like this where if Austria gets Spain under a personal union, then you get 25 aggressive expansion and lose opinion with everyone. And now we have a new formable, which is Austria-Hungary, which is cool because, you know, it's a slight alternate history thing, which is always fun. So we have the Austro-Hungarian ideas, where we've got, what's that, land morale. We have no religion penalty, deprived reputation, which is those are like very strong, with some discipline at the start. Manpower, was that plus 30%? That's really good. Gold triggers is okay. Clever rest is the useless thing. State governing cost is decent. Yeah, all of these are really good. So, well, most of them. So that's pretty cool. But now the reason I'm speeding through that is because I really want to look at Bohemia, which is interesting. They've decided to go with Bohemia. Starts with 30 to 50 devastation, which it makes a lot of sense because it was in a bit of a devastation. Like Bohemia starts as one of the richest nations in Europe, whereas at the time it was kind of rough. But we do have a new nation, which is Great Moravia, which I'm so excited to just dive in and form and make Hussite. Obviously, it's heresy that's Catholic. Over here we have absolutism, which is good. Trade goods, global manpower modifier 25% is very nice. Overextension impact modifier minus like 25%. I haven't seen that one before, so that's really cool. Missionary is 1, which is going to be very useful. Monarch admin power, very good, very unique. We get some discipline, which is kind of bad. Tolerance is okay, and max absolutism as well as discipline. So they're quite nice and quite like endgame heavy, which is kind of unique. So the tree has doubled in size, which is beautiful. Because Bohemia was so cool at the time. I mean, they had goddamn tanks. Well, they had wagons that had cannons on them. Ooh. If you complete this mission once, we've humiliated Austria, you receive... I think it makes it permanent, it said. This one, sorry. Oktar's Legacy. Minus 10% corporation cost, which is very, very good if you've humiliated the Habsburgs. These are all very, very interesting missions, including being able to seize ownership for Slovakia, which is nice because it means that you're not like locked out of lands via having a personal union. Because a lot of times, for example, you shouldn't take if you're playing optimally, you shouldn't take the Lithuania personal union as Poland. You should just conquer them directly. It's a lot quicker, a lot more effective. So all in all, like very, very solid And finally, I mean, if you remember, I made a video where I had to become a Hussite Emperor by, like, fixing it pretty much so that people stayed at war for 25 years. So it's nice we've got the Hussite protest. So if Hussite's a majority religion, then you can make Hussite the official religion, which would be very, very good. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And we also do have a specific German tree, which, again, same as Italy, like, I think is really cool. And I'm very happy that they're getting more content. But it's going to be inherently less interesting to me than things like Bohemia and the starting guys. But I will say the idea of cultural unity and that mechanic they're bringing in, very cool. So you can integrate all of these different cultures into one unified German, which is very, very interesting because that's the idea, isn't it? You remove regionalism and you bring them into one thing, which is something you don't really see in EU4, so that's really cool. But moving on to the east, Hisinkefa, Hormuz, Oman, Theodoro, and Trebizond. So first up, we have Hisinkefa, which is, at this point, would the video have gone live? The video should have gone live, me playing Hisinkefa and sort of having a miserable time of it. So it'd be fun for me to play again. So we have a specific Ayyubid dynasty, which is very cool. Well, obviously, it was already Ayyubid, but Ayyubid dynasty government reform. All Levantine cultures which are not accepted are treated as accepted, which is very cool, as well as getting possible advisors, +1 and states governing costs, which is a very, very good, powerful, in my opinion, starting reform. And I'm glad they've taken lessons from Great Armenia, where the Hisinkefen, or Ayyubid, I should say, ideas are going to get strengthened the further you play. And I like the idea, because for me, it feels like I'm strengthening the national identity the more I like push out, especially starting as like a one province minor in Hisinkefa, pushing out and then sort of doing better does make sense as to why then I would have stronger ideas. And the interesting thing about Hisinkefa, and it's mentioned here, and I said it in my video, is that they can go from anywhere from west and form Egypt into east and forming the Mughals. It's kind of ridiculous. Not sure why they can form the Mughals, but they can. Personally, I don't know why you wouldn't always do this and just form legacy of Salahuddin, but hey. Now we have more traders in Oman and Hormuz. We have a new mechanic of Arabian mercantilism, which is very, very interesting. And I really like it because I feel like there was a lot of focus on European traders, but the Arab traders, very, very influential at this time. They became less influential as the game went on. It is Europa Universalis after all, but they still had a good amount of power and money to them. Up until the Portuguese turned up, really. And the Ottomans and everyone else. But obviously I'm going to be biased, so take what I say with a pinch of salt. So, high naval tradition, golden era, trade companies, rulers' diplomatic skill, and being at peace is very, very interesting, giving you merchant trade power as well as trade efficiency. And it doesn't seem too tricky to have that up high. And oh my god, with it, you could transfer that into just loads of trade stuff. Ooh, and you can propagate religion without having to have Sunni as the dominant faith. Very useful. And I like this as well, the idea that you don't just need territorial conquests, you need accumulating trade power instead. Because I feel like a lot of the trading missions are like, hey, own this region. But it doesn't really make sense because I can get the same effect that I would have to my nation via trade, which makes more sense. I'm glad they've gone down that route. And it's cool that the Omanis can make their own Marine Corps. It's going to empower the Marine units, which is very fun. Marines only Oman is 100% what I'm going to be doing. And now we have the Empire of Trebizond, which is very interesting because it does look like they're flipping the script a little bit. Because you're allowed to have heathen royal marriages. Because that's what they did historically. You're also going to get, let's see. Tolerance of heathens makes sense. Unjustified demands also makes sense. And opinion of countries from others of a heathen religion makes also a lot of sense. Given, what they did. Missionary's central objective is the restoration of Byzantium, which, so what I said previously about Italy being centered focus around creating and forming Rome, and the fact that there's a little bit of a niggle for me, this is the opposite, where it makes so much sense that Trebizond would go and form Rome, that it makes it so much more satisfying. And I like you're building up, it's fun when the devs, look at a nation like, Trebizond and give it permanent modifiers, because realistically, if you're playing a normal game, Trebizond's dead, right? So we'll never realize the ideas of core creation cost -5% and these permanent modifiers. The AI will never have it, so you're never going to get an overpowered Trebizond in the east because it's just never going to happen. So it's cool that you do have these permanent modifiers that the
player can take advantage of that the AI wouldn't. So you can balance it. Because if you gave this to Poland, for example, Poland's always going to be there. And it doesn't mean that Poland's going to blob and destroy everyone. Turpin's never going to do that, so you can afford to give them, and obviously the AI and yourself, these massive modifiers. I say massive, but I think they're pretty good. Provinces in Anatolia will slowly begin converting to Greek, Pontic, Cappadocian culture via an event. I think that's great. I think it's something EU4 has always been lacking, is this slow cultural thing, something that Imperator does really, really well. You tell I'm an Imperator fan. And so it's cool that we can kind of emulate that a little bit. Theodora, my beloved. Theodora was basically what helped put the channel on the map a little bit. I did an Athens campaign, which was my first ever gameplay, and I think Theodora was the second one I ever did, and both of them blew up and showed me that I could do gameplay as a thing, because I just did like these little tutorials before. And I was like, hey, I could just make weird videos of me playing the video game, and people are like, hey, sounds good, let's watch him. So I will always, always, always have a soft spot for Theodora. So I'm very excited with this. So Theodora had a gradual decline in influence, leading to their eventual annexation. At the same time, they had issues with Genoa. If you don't know, that Genoa has a strong, where they have 3 provinces in the region. Is it 3 provinces or is it 2? I think it's 3. And they have a lot. They have trade, and that is going to be hurting you. And they usually hate you as well. So you can either be diplomatic with them, or you can conquer them directly. I'm never going to ally with no Genoans, no filthy Genoans when I'm playing as Theodora. They can opt to integrate with the Tatars. That's disgusting, but they can. They get bonuses for their Cossacks and strengthen the steppes provinces economically. And they can also go and conquer Constantinople, which kind of makes sense, as they are descendants of just the Byzantines. Well, the Byzantine dynasties. They have merchant aristocracy, which is interesting. You can place trade ports, which I think would be a lot of fun. You can also recruit foreign general. That's such a cool bit of flavor for something that is a small state. So we give them 1 year of our income, but in return they give us 10 army tradition, as well as generated general, as well as their opinion of us and their army tradition. That's a lot of fun. That's very unique. I like that. That's really cool. Finally, skip a few steps. After humiliating the Holy Roman Emperor, they're unique. Get a unique class spell, like the Gothic Invasion, which is basically imperialism for European things, which is awesome. And if that's so cool. You're conquering major German cities like Vienna, gives you diplomatic organization cost, Prague, advisor cost, Cologne, mystery strength, Aachen, admin efficiency, Lubeck, naval force. That I really appreciate that. Gothic Invasion PTSD support group. Oh, you have no idea how hard this goddamn achievement was. Especially earlier on, like 3-4 years ago. My god, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It was so hard. I got it on my other account, man. I need to get it on this account. I will. Anyway, let's carry on. That's my favorite so far, though. But it might just be challenged by the Tatars, Central Asia, and Mongol hordes. They've changed Chagatai to Mongolistan, which I'm always going to call it Chagatai. Like, it's a more appropriate name for sure, but it's already inbuilt in my head. I'm glad that they've updated the horde conquest, because it did feel really empty. So we'll see how that goes. This is always going to be a fun campaign. I'm going to look at this briefly. So securing trade, good, because before it was just like, conquer this, okay, you get claims. Conquer this, okay, you get claims. Conquer this, you get claims. So restoring the Ilkhanate, that's good. And later on you'll find out that spawning in the Ilkhanate and having these like brother hordes, as they're known as, is not going to prevent you from forming the Mongol Empire as it did before. Ooh, Army Organizer gives you plus 5% available loot per level, so you can get 25% available loot. Nice. Dude, plus 15% there. I'm sensing a little something in terms of loot. There could be something we could stack here. And then heading west. I like the idea of, as the Great Horde heading west, or the Golden Horde heading west before you head east. I think that would be more appropriate. They probably would go west first, because you're going to go for the richer areas versus trying to round up a bunch of steppe nomads that are very good at fighting like you. And it's cool you got unique, so Tatars have unique missions about Tatars, Central Asia about Central Asia, and the Oirat Mongolia about China. So yeah, very cool. I like this, as both Mongols and Tatars will be able to make Kazakh into your own subject through the tree, feeding them their core land should you wish to. Because, yeah, and they're cooperative vassals, which are cheaper to integrate, which is nice. They love it when that happens, because it makes so much sense. But yeah, Kazakh and Siberia, Kazakh particularly is one of the best vassals in the game, in my opinion. They have so many things. But look, available loot plus 20%, like a dragon until the end of the game. You could trigger all these and probably get like an extra 200% available loot and just start sit on China, and then, oh my god, there's some exploits here. Not exploits, but you know,
bumping it up. Alright, and here you have the Brother Hordes, which is nice. Yuan, Khane, Golden Horde. I want to do a triple campaign with, suggest your favorite YouTubers in the comments down below. Between like different hordes and then just have this massive Mongol like confederation. But it feels to me like the horde stuff is some of the most fleshed out things, which is really, really good to see. Like Yuan has a separate mission tree, everyone else has a separate mission tree, so I feel like there's a lot of flavor to go on and on, whereas before it felt like once you'd played one horde and launched into China, you'd kind of done it all. But that's never, like, the horde's always going to be fun. I do want, like the Timurids and Mughals, I think, are going to be super interesting. It's nice that we can instantly annex Afghanistan now, which is very cool. And it makes sense that all the Timurids have an additional 20 army tradition. These guys are descendants of, you know, one of the greatest conquerors in history. So, yeah. And I don't know if the Ajam war that's going to get triggered is going to help or hinder the Timurids. We'll have to see. Like, I'm not talking as a player. As a player, obviously, you'll immediately want to attack them. Because the cost of taking core territories is decreased by 50%, which is fantastic. But I don't know if, like, we might just start getting the Timurid block. There's always, like, different, like, not meta nations, but, like, top dog nations. And for a little while, for about a period of about 4 months, 5 months, before they got, you know, rinsed, it was the Timurids. The Timurids were the big bad guy. Like, every game, you'd see them massive, and you couldn't do anything about them. Okay, so mission tree-wise, I'm going to focus a little bit more on this because the Timurids are such a fascinating nation to me. We have the Ajam rebellion and like basically reclaiming the Timurid Empire. One of the reasons the Timurids are so cool to me is that you have this idea of like this big empire that you're trying to keep together or reconquer before heading out. So you deal internally and then you explode outwards, and that's like the exploding outwards is like your reward for fixing the internal issues. And it is interesting that you like not forming the Mughals and going into India is an option. That's something I'm 100% going to be exploring because that's very cool because it challenges the sort of default knowledge of we're going with Timurids, we're going into Mughals and going into India. You have to have special. I like it when this happens. You have to do special decisions in order to remove two very unpleasant, or inconvenient, they say here, privileges. And we have unique mechanics. Lovely. And, okay, so if you focus admin, yearly corruption, focus military, you get your land maintenance, focus diplomatic, yearly unrest. That's cool. Nomad versus Persia branches here. So if you don't go for the Mughals, you can either be Nomad or Persian. I'm probably going to go with Nomad. That sounds really cool. Horseman of the Apocalypse. Yep, anytime I see a mission like that, immediately taking it. Cavalry compatibility plus 20% and flanking ability plus 50%. Oh, no. Strengthen the emirs in the officer court, state privilege, giving movement speed plus 5%. Ah, that's so cool. Yuan campaign, cede Mongolia to Yuan, make Yuan incorporated vassal, and they get permanent claims. This is very interesting. Plunder economy, can raise provinces. Ah, finally, the Timurids, who are descended from Timur, who raised many, many large states. I mean, you got the pyramids of Delhi. I don't know how many millions he killed. Can actually raise provinces now. But you do get raising power gain rise 50%. I suppose they don't want to like supercharge it, but I don't know why that's there. I don't know why the Timurids specifically wouldn't get the full power. So I'll be rather intrigued to feel out by playing the Timurids and sort of see why that is and whether or not I agree with that. Because I don't mind it per se, but I'm confused as to why, for example, like the Hordes would get it, but the Timurids wouldn't. Because presumably it's going to come later on in the game anyway. But you get a unique subject type, Sorghum subject type. Land grants granted to various generals and nobles who govern such lands and pay taxes. They don't pay taxes to the overlord, but contribute a lot in the form of force and manpower. Very useful. They need to be diplomatic annex and take twice the diplomatic power. They don't cost a diplomatic slot, but they can only be a limited amount governed by a diplomatic reputation. For every 2 diplomatic reputation, you can have 1 Sorghum. So if you had like 10 diplomatic relation, you could have 5 of these Sorghums that don't take any slots, but provide you with manpower and and force limit. Will they be rebellious? Because if they have like a reduction in the rebellion, it'd be pretty good. Yeah, see, this is what I read before. I just forgot and was just like hoping that I was wrong. But yeah, so they act essentially like normal vassals. Otherwise, they're like mild marches. I don't know if they'll be at like, because realistically, you'll probably have a diplomatic reputation of about 6. I hope it doesn't go away if you, let's say I hope it's at your max. So let's say I manage to pump up my diplomatic reputation to 12 and it drops down to 6 because I take a bunch of land. Hope it doesn't automatically remove your Sorgles. Soyurgles. Soyurgles. Sorgles. I don't know how to pronounce that. Alright, but now the Mugles. Obviously, the Mugles have probably, for a long time, had the most interesting mechanic of the game, where if you conquered an entire culture, you would get a bonus from that culture. And obviously the mission tree is focused on uniting India. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. They had like initial spurs of conquest, but were quite focused on like internal building. You have to remember when the British first came to India, the Mughals were like the big daddy. You know, they came crawling to the Mughals to try and trade with them, not the other way around. Historical determinism has informed the opinion that the British went to the Mughals and the Mughals wanted their tech and everything else like that. This was a gunpowder empire that had tech almost on par with the Europeans. There wasn't like a massive difference. And they also were the ones with the spices and the money and the gold. And the Europeans didn't have as much stuff. So it is very interesting. Yeah, the whole conquest of India in general is just complete historical determinism. But I digress. These are very conquest heavy. Very conquest heavy missions. There's a very loyal vassal. You really saw your southern Indian provinces. Cool. Yeah, these are very cool. Which, you know, you want, really, as much as, yeah, as far as the Mughals go. I love this. Did you see India's going to get some more content? Brill, I can't wait to interact with that. So you're going to play as them. Colonizing India for the southern time. Play as them? But there you have it. We have the summary of each of them, the justification. I'm very excited for this DLC. I think it's an amazing send-off for EU4. I would be very surprised if this is not the last DLC. Ludi's been saying it's been the last DLC for the last 6 or 7 of them, I think. Which is great. But yeah, I think I'll concur with others and say I think this is obviously going to be the last DLC. This was a really cool announcement trailer. Definitely check it out if you haven't. So yeah, let me know what you're most excited for. For me, I think the Nomad Timurids, the Mayan stuff, I think, and Venice are probably my 3 most anticipated changes or anticipated flavor stuff. It's gonna be super cool. I'm gonna have a blast. I'll probably be playing. Obviously, I do a lot of variety on this channel, but for when this DLC comes out, whilst it won't be exclusively EU4, I'll probably go very EU4 heavy. So again, nice little final send off, and we'll just see how it goes. I'll try a couple of styles and stuff. So you tell me if you're excited. Tell me what nations you want to play. What nations you want to form. Should I just play as Tunis? Because I kind of want to, because I think it'd be funny if the first one of the new DLC I just play as Tunis. But yeah, I'll leave that up to you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Make sure to like and subscribe. Goodbye. Huge shout out to my Patreons. Most importantly, Redguard76, Lewis Wright, Ryan B, Atreides, Blenderman, Crilly, Ghostwolf, JadeOut52, Sjalmi, Luke, Matthew McHugh, Mike473, Mikey Lewis, Original, ShadowSinger, and Tom. Your support means a lot, guys. Whilst you're here, why not watch another video? I mean, it's right there. Just click on it.